Well, hello there. Glad to have you back because today we'll be talking about the most fun melee DPS in the War Within, and we're going to be very strict about how we rank these because we do have raids to consider, Mythic Plus to consider, hero talents, damage, rotations, talent design, all sorts of things from my personal biases, but we'll see if you agree with where I rank all of the melee specs today. And in order to have fun on a melee character, you have to have the right race, and the right one is orcs because I love orcs, dude. And that's where today's sponsor comes in handy. Raid Shadow Legends, that it's actually satiating my love for orcs. Raid just has like all of the races, factions, and everything. That's actually 16 factions, by the way. But having a team that you actually like and you're actually, invested in emotionally because you think elves are cool, if not orcs, it actually goes a long way into just taking the game one step at a time, and eventually you will start to explore more and more of it because it is a very, very big game. And if you are a new player, this is the time to start because you'll also be helping us out if you use our link down below to download Raid and start playing right now, because there is a promotion going around for new players, which I am unfortunately not one of, that will get you the Sun Wukong champion until January the 7th by using the Monkey King promo in-game, which is only available for 72 hours after registration and if you downloaded the game with our link. And there's also the Christmas event that already started with December the 5th and is available until January the 15th. Similarly to the Monkey King one, after registering and downloading the game with our link, head on over to xmas.raidrpg.com, link is on the screen, and enter your raid ID. You then have only 24 hours to participate in the event by throwing snowballs to save Santa in true winter fashion for a chance to win giga prizes from in-game loot to Amazon gift cards, smartphones, consoles, and $5,000. Thank you, Raid, for sponsoring this video. Starting with Arms Warrior, which has been a very difficult spec for me because it is my soul. Normally this would be my favorite out of the list in terms of concept, but they've kind of ruined it. I have given it many shots, tries to play it again and again and again, and there's just something missing. The core of Arms kind of still is there. You still want big mortal strikes, big executes, big Colossus smash windows and all of that, but the hero talents just don't really do that much. They elevate the spec a little bit, but they don't feel like they make Arms what Arms is. Arms has undergone some spec changes going into the War Within, where we've lost Double Blade Storm, where Overpower kind of shifted a little bit some of its profile, and it feels very bland with just focusing a lot on sweeping strikes. I don't necessarily am opposed to a very heavy sweeping strikes focused playstyle, but I feel like we've lost other things to be able to play this one thing. It just doesn't feel like it's complete or up to standard with the other spec. The fact that now Avatar isn't played with any of its capstones, it just feels like a boring cooldown, just makes me feel like, dude, this just doesn't feel like Arms. Something's wrong here, something's missing. And I've been feeling that way ever since the beta of the War Within, and I hope that it might change. I see some potential there, it is some fun, but for me, Arms Warrior just needs some love. Assassination is a meta spec right now, and that will matter a little bit when it comes to placing it in the list. It won't put it all the way into Gigafon, into the, the S tier equivalent, but it does put it above Arms Warrior, and I will actually make it decently fun. Assassination Rogue is a main that I've had before, and it definitely feels way better to have the actual kind of working hero talents, although I believe Rogue still has quite a few bugs affecting all specs, which is unfortunate, but Assassination is actually cranking, and you feel how weirdly this sounds and how on the nose it might be, like an assassin with the Death Stalker hero talent tree. I like the design of Assassination in general, with Caustic Spatter and Crimson Tempest being two ways of dealing AoE damage, which is what Feral used to have and lost, and I was sad when that happened, but Assassination managed to retain it. I do miss playing my Rogue quite a bit, and ever since I think of Rogue, I think of my little Assassination. I'm like, ooh, one day it's coming back. Outlaw has kind of shifted a little bit since Dragonflight. It was a little bit of crazy fun when I played it in, I believe it was Season 3, one of the most fun seasons of a WoW period. It kind of trailed off a little bit, and I feel like the hero talents kind of work against it. I might be a dumbass. Listen, I'll preface this as well. I will take my fair share of the dumbassery, but I am playing over 30 specs in the game for years now, and I still need to double or triple or quadruple read the Trickster hero talent of Outlaw to realize, okay, what exactly do I want to accomplish here, and does it even matter, or do I just play Outlaw, just fire it up and just go, right? Which is not really Outlaw's strength. I felt like Outlaw shines the most when you plan, when you have some strategy to your playstyle, when you react in a certain way to your roll the bones buff, with how you extend the buffs. If you play keep it rolling, how do you mechanically interact with crack shot to get the most out of all of your stuff? That's where Outlaw was fun. It's definitely okay. It's not in the same vein as ARMS. It's probably fine. Obviously, it's doing a lot of damage. One of the best DPS specs in the game currently. But for me, it feels like it needs a little bit more. Assassination has that. Outlaw does not. Whew, baby. Survival Hunter. I have called for this rework for so many years, and it's finally here, and it's such a dangerous spec to have in my roster right now because I'm not a hunter main and I'm a mage. I'm very, very happy with my mage main, but Survival Hunter just kind of creeps around the corner like it's summer, it's August, it's so hot, and the ice cream cone is just begging me to get there. It's like, oh, you can get some cool, fruity, creamy tastes and fight off all of this heat. And that's how survival feels. It feels like it's a danger to have because I can just pop it in and forget that every other class exists in a game. It is one of the most fun melees I have played in a very, 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 very long time. Definitely should give survival a go, despite the fact that the hero talents don't really do that much for it. Pack leader is kind of cool to just manage Powell, but that's about it, and that's not what I think of doing as a pack leader. I was hoping for more pet interaction, clearly for more beast interaction. Sentinel is just turbo boring. Sure, you probably have to manage your owl a little bit, but considering that tanks kind of pull stuff out of your owl all the time, I just don't want to care about it anymore because I've been disappointed so much, and I think this is how my dad thinks. But that's where survival is. We're going to move on to enhancement, which is also up there. Like, I don't know which one of these is more fun to me. Maybe enhancement a little bit. It's weird because I feel like survival has probably more variety in terms of playstyle, and that does a big thing for me when it comes to deciding how fun a spec is. But enhancement just does some really cool stuff, and I think it's one of the best versions of enhancement we've had in years. Obviously, it's probably the #1 DPS spec in the game currently in terms of performance. It's great. It needed this for such a long time, and I'm glad that it's finally shining. I would like to see more Totemic though. I know Totemic is not that bad, but I know that pretty much Stormbringer is just taking all of the cake and eating it and getting all the diabetes. It's fun enhancement. It's very flashy. It's very shaman-y, and it's basically what I was hoping to play for all of these years. Tempest is so satisfying to press. Building up to those big finishers is great. I don't know. There's nothing else to say. Enhancement is cool. Play it. Feral is, for me, always going to be decently fun. I feel like Druid is suffering overall in terms of his design and has some issues, and still they're not completely dragging Feral down. It's always going to be a little bit better. It's missing a couple of things that Assassination has retained, and I mentioned this before, and it's something that the Feral community has also pointed out at one point, and that it's been dumbed down a little bit, and it's getting kind of dumbed down consistently more and more, at least from where I am standing. And Druid of the Claw just does not do what I want it to do. It does it for Guardian Druid, where you can actually whip into cat form and do stuff, but it doesn't feel like it does the same for Feral. The hero talents are a little bit of a letdown personally for me, and the fact that we've lost the like I mentioned for Assassination Rogue, we've lost the Terrapin Wounds talent that gave us AoE burst damage through spamming Primal Wrath, and now we just have Rampant Ferocity, which kind of narrows down what we have to do and doesn't give us a choice anymore, and it feels like that is a detriment to the spec itself. Maybe this happened because it needed to balance some things with the spec, maybe it needed to make sure that it matches with the hero talents, but as far as I'm concerned, it just took away a bunch of death that I kind of enjoyed in choices with Feral, where you can just spam Primal Wrath to do AoE bleed damage or priority target funnel damage into one dude with just using Rampant Ferocity as a cleave mechanic and using bites instead of Primal Wraths. That felt cool to do. Other than that, it's just decent, it's fun. I rank it a little bit higher because of personal biases. It could probably be at the same level of Outlaw. It's very close to being dragged down to Outlaw level from the sheer fact that the class tree is a little bit boring. The spec tree is kind of fun, minus the things that I've just mentioned, and the hero talents could be a little bit better, but despite that, Feral is still really fun to play. Frost Death Knight has been something that I have gotten into lately normally for kind of like a video reason, which I'm not sure, it's probably gonna come after this, where you'll see. It's a surprise. It's a Frost DK Unholy DK video. Frost has been reworked in the War Within, and it is really fun, and I am very conflicted as to where to put it. I really want to put it into Giga Fun because it is really cool, but I just feel like it's way more fun than these two. I think I'll put it into Giga Fun. But there is a big caveat to Frost DK, and that is that it's still a little bit simplistic. It's Giga Fun. I don't see myself maining it, but every time I play it, I have a lot of fun, with all the frustrations of my Breath of Sindragosa being fucked up, but when it's not, it's very satisfying. I feel like Deathbringer really makes the spec shine, and if you don't want to play Deathbringer, you can go into Rite of the Apocalypse, and you can actually play a two-hander focused build. There's actually so many builds you can go with Frost. Obviously, they're not all equal the same way, but mostly they apply to Mythic Plus, which is the more volatile of the content, chaotic, and actually gives you a lot of room for error or room to go niche in a specific direction to make your playstyle shine a little bit more, and I feel like it's one of the few melees that actually accomplishes this. Not to mention that just being a DK in the War Within feels so good, and it does do a big chunk of the heavy lifting for Frost and Unholy as well, being super tanky, having all of these grips, having a range kick, having anti-magic zone, anti-magic shell. All of these make it so much better as a non-DK player. Whenever I hop onto my Frost DK, it feels like, oh, I can just relax now. I don't really have that feeling with a lot of other classes. Fury Warrior has kind of taken a leap for me in terms of what is fun for Warrior, and it has actually pleasantly surprised me in so far as in I'm normally an arms player, and everything that I was hoping for arms to be, it's kind of like baked into Fury. Whatever playstyle you play, particularly Slayer gives you meaty executes and meaty blaze storms, which is essentially an arms warrior thing, but now you have it as Fury. They're still good for arms, but Fury shouldn't feel this good with them, and it's very explosive and very reactive. It's still a little bit simplistic, and I think maybe a little bit too simplistic at this point, downstream from Frost DK, which kind of felt like it was always the other way around, but it is really fun and really responsive. Listen, if you want to do a simple spec right, do Fury Warrior the way it is now, and you can even go into Mountain Thane, where you completely replace Whirlwind with Thunderclap, and that's like a whole new thing to put into your brain space. And when you do your AoE rotation, considering that you also get Thunder Blasts relatively often, you don't really have to always think of, oh, am I actually activating my AoE with my Whirlwind? You kind of always have it to an extent. Plus, the plethora of burst cooldowns that you have are just incredible. Like, if there are dudes alive, Fury kills them. That's basically the feeling that you have as Fury Warrior. It does have shortcomings, the shortcomings of Warrior, the fact that your AoE is kind of limited to the amount of targets that you hit, the fact that you don't really bring a lot to the group, unfortunately. Intervene doesn't really mean much, Spell Reflect doesn't really mean much if you're not the one targeted by it, so that's kind of like a Warrior thing, which of course affects all specs. Havoc is just really weird for me. It's not particularly bad, but I just don't see myself playing it at all, and I don't know why. I've been trying for 2 expansions right now to get into playing Demon Hunter way more. I just cannot get behind Havoc, and once again, this is not because it's necessarily a bad spec. Obviously, it's performing decently. It has some good things going for it in the hero talents. I like the playstyle of Essence Break and Momentum, but it felt like even after Sanctum of Domination, Shadowlands, when the Essence Break playstyle for Havoc became really good, and you were playing Momentum and not Inertia, that was really fun for me. That was probably, in theory, one of the best versions of Havoc that I could enjoy, but ever since then, it feels like it's kind of being dumbed down again in a sense, where it's just weird. It doesn't feel like Havoc, the Havoc that I played back in Legion, what I wanted to get accustomed to and be in love with. It feels like there's a lot of noise and nothing really is happening. Little tiny explosions all over the place with the demon surges. Sure, I don't know. There's something missing here, kind of like arms, and I cannot really put my finger on it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because I shouldn't have to look for reasons to like a spec. The spec is either good or not, and Havoc just doesn't do it for me, unfortunately. Red Paladin, close to being giga fun because of a couple of things, but Red Paladin is at the top of decently fun in terms of what I would like from a spec rather, and this goes into the simplistic way of making a spec fun. Red is simple, it is really bare bones, and that's kind of what's keeping it from being giga fun for me, but also the fact that there are some weird tuning things going on in its spec tree where you're playing execution sense in AoE from the sheer fact that it's just overall a much better gain in terms of your overall performance, which should be a choice to deal more single target damage, not to just have the most damage possible, which is where Final Reckoning kind of falls short since it was nerfed and it was a little bit too much nerfed. And unfortunately, as opposed to Frost DK, Red just doesn't have that many builds. I don't even think you have builds. I think you probably just switch 2 to 3 talents from single target to AoE and you kind of never really look back. That is a problem when it comes to making a spec fun. Even though the hero talents are really cool and really fun, particularly Templar right now, they just don't really do much. Like putting this side by side with Frost DK has probably 5 times the variety in terms of playstyle, and that says a lot for a spec that has historically been way more simple than Red Paladin. And Red has that potential baked into its spec. And even with that, it's still decently fun because I just enjoy the Paladin class. Similar to DK, it feels so good to be Paladin, to have Divine Shield, to have all of these defensive cooldowns, all of the immunes, the dispels, the mobility, the reach of range, the damage, the super accessible damage that, as opposed to Frost Death Knight, is really bursty and doesn't really require a lot of maintenance or conditions to make happen, kind of like Fury Warrior. They would be kind of in the same boat in that sense. Subtlety is a little bit in a weird spot. I could see myself play it, but it did lose Shadow Dust, the talent that made you reduce the cooldowns of your cooldowns, which for me was a big thing because it made me feel like I could be in control and adjust my playstyle and my cooldowns based off of what I would need in a particular environment and context. That's when I mained Subtlety back in Mirdrasil at my with my guild's progress on Smolderon, being able to attune my cooldowns to the phases of the boss, which would apply to dungeons as well, would have been really cool. And that's the kind of subtlety, the tactical subtlety that I really enjoyed. Very difficult to pull off, one of the most difficult melees I've ever played, and it feels like that's slightly going away. Even though in terms of the design is fine, but my biggest problem probably with Subtlety right now is just its damage profile. Normally this doesn't really factor into how much I like a spec, even though weirdly enough the specs in Gigafon are all the top DPSers in terms of melee. Subtlety just is too low tuned, man. There has to be a point where you make a spec so difficult to execute like Subtlety, it cannot be this low tuned. It just doesn't appeal to me as a Subtlety enjoyer. Normally I kind of like Subtlety a little bit more than Assassination. I just don't really, I cannot get behind it. And I'm pretty sure that more Subtlety rogues would are feeling this way, and a lot more people would play Subtlety if it didn't just have really terrible damage. And every couple of weeks we just get fat black powder buffs that still don't do anything for it in terms of AoE, where it's probably still one of the worst specs in Mythic Plus, period. Not a place you want to be if you want to be valued as a most fun spec. Unholy is something that I haven't gotten into as much lately since I've been just on the big Frost train, but I can see this being giga fun. But I do have to be honest with myself, I've been a little bit too biased for Frost DK, and I will put it here, it might as well be giga fun, but I haven't yet played it yet. We'll probably have a revised version of this with the 11.1 patch that's probably not really around the corner, but coming soon, and maybe I'll put Unholy a little bit higher. I know from Marcelian playing Unholy, there are a couple of builds you can get into, but I know that it does not have the variety of Frost Death Knight at this point, and you're kind of only really playing Rider of the Apocalypse. There was some slight resurgence of Sand Lane, but I feel like that quickly just died down and didn't really see the light of day. And even though normally I play Unholy over Frost, I like the fantasy of the Necromancer, I like the fantasy of summoning a lot of stuff, the fact that Army of the Dead is dead kind of puts me off of it. Sure, Abomination is really cool, but I like to have that option. I think that's one of the best things that happened to Unholy in terms of its design, is giving you this different damage profile, where Army of the Dead was this big 5-minute cooldown for big single target fights. I think it's maybe 3 minutes now. They've played with the cooldowns a little bit in the last couple of months. And you can get a Raised Abomination for the AoE value of that and just get it way more often and have a much more pleasant dungeon profile. But it seems like Abomination is just good across the board in anything. And whenever the builds get cookie cutter like that, they kind of drop down, which is kind of the theme with decently fun specs in this tier, because pretty much all of them, maybe with the exception of Assassination, maybe, they kind of have like very little build diversity. Unholy and Red being like the spearheads of this, which normally they would be very fun specs. And last but not least, Windwalker. It's gonna be front and center of the OK could play it, and there are a couple of reasons for it. Windwalker playstyles right now don't really play the 24 Blackout Kicks builds, at least last I've checked they didn't. Maybe they have in the recent days. And that was some of the most fun that I've had with Windwalker in beta. That's not the only thing. Obviously, there's a lot more going for Windwalker. There are a lot of options to play different kinds of builds, and maybe I need to explore a little bit more. But as I've played it so far, that's as much as I've gone to it in terms of how fun it is. It didn't really attract me to play it a little bit more. That probably has to do a lot with the hero talents not being very enticing to play, because they're just very boring. When you give me a Windwalker and you're telling me that I can be a Shadow Pan Windwalker, and Shadow Pan is just nothing. That's just passive damage, and I don't really feel like I'm embracing the Terran Zoo concept. I don't really feel like I'm part of the monastery and that just bringing peace and balance and harmony to those. Like it's lacking there, and that's a big minus for me when you're trying to sell me on the concept of Windwalker. And I really want to see the Windwalker bloom into a version that can have all of these cool new capstones that were designed and put them into practice. On theory, based off of those alone, it would be at least decently fun for me. But it has a bunch of minuses that personally just put it down. I think damage is kind of it, although it doesn't have terrible damage. It definitely has way more damage than Salty. Actually, you know what? I'm kind of changing my mind. I'm putting it a little bit higher. No, I don't think Windwalker deserves to be in the same tier as Subtlety. I think it has way too many good things going for it, and I think the hero talents just do it a massive disservice. Once again, guys, if you want to help us out and get 2 free epic champions as new users for a limited time only, download Raid from our link below, and you can play with Vergus. That will augment your team to push deeper into dungeons, as well as Rector Drath, one of the strongest epic supports that buffs, heals, and revives your team. Boons that come in handy when farming content. And lo and behold, that's how the melees look for me in terms of fun, and I'm really curious to hear what people believe their, let's say, Gigafun or S tier level of fun melees would be this expansion, if you have played more than just 1 or 2. And if you are playing some of these melees, like Enhancement, like Windwalker, you might be thinking, sometimes I kind of want to not have to wait for 10,000 hours to get into groups, and I probably would like to try healing out, but it's just very scary, and my class has a healing spec. But what do? Well, how about you check our video on how to get into healing really quick and easy right here.